Right before we jump into this video, if you'd like to take better pictures in only 11 days, I created a free mini video course that you can sign up for right now at froknosphoto.com/11 days. Now let's get into the video. Jared Polin, froknosphoto.com, and this is the user's guide for the Canon EOS M50 that you may or may not have in your hands. Now, the first thing that I want to do with this video is run through the outside of the camera, how to put the lens on, where the battery goes, where the SD card goes, and what each of the buttons means and what their functionality does. Now, if you want to skip ahead to me setting up the menu system for how I would personally set it up, you can see the links down below with the table of contents. But first things first, let's start with where the battery and memory card goes right here on the bottom. You just push this switch, let it flop open like that. You like that jiggle? Look at this jiggle. Boing, 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 boing. This is where the battery goes. It only goes in one way. You move that switch down, pop this in, click, boom, it's in. Click, click, boom. That was the band called Saliva, if anybody remembers. They had that song, Click, Click, Boom. It's just it's a deep cut. SD card goes right here. You press in to take it out. So here's your SD card, boom, clicks in, that's where everything goes. Just for the future, try to have two batteries, because if you're on vacation and something goes wrong with the first battery, or it just goes down too quick, you have an extra battery. Same thing with memory cards. Always try to have extra memory cards with you, no matter where you're traveling, just in case you fill one up or one card ever goes bad. So now let's go into how to put this lens on, take the lens on and take the lens off. So I'm going to start with it off. Never touch the inside of this camera. This is the image sensor. If you scratch this or do something wrong to it, your camera is basically screwed. You're going to have to send it back. It's going to be expensive to get it repaired. So this is one thing you want to be careful about, is if you're in the rain or in other kind of elements where there's a lot of dust, you may not want to change your lens in that situation, or always tilt it down. But in this case, I have to tilt it up to show Steven here, the camera guy, how to make this work. You have a white dot there, you have a white dot right here on the lens. What you do, line the two up, boom, turn it away, boom, you hear the click, and now your lens is on. So that's how to put the lens on and take the lens off. Now let's start with the on and off button. On and off switch right here, off, on. Super simple. We'll go around this menu dial. You've got auto, that's the green mode. That's full auto, where the camera's gonna do everything for you, and it also limits the amount of menu options that you have, and I'll show you that in a second when we get to that section. Next up, you've got something called hybrid auto mode, and I'm reading the back of the screen because it says, create a digest movie with your stills. I don't even know what the hell that means. That's probably something that I'm personally not using, and I haven't used it with this camera to date. So next you have scene modes. I, again, don't use scene modes. If you do want to use them, go ahead and play with them and see if that works for you. But I generally leave the camera set to manual when I'm doing photos or when I'm doing video. But again, full auto is going to be fine for you if you're just looking to take snapshots and have the camera do everything you're looking for it to do. Then you've got creative filters, which I don't touch again. Video mode, so this is just for doing video. You can still access video from any of the other menus or from any other parts of the dial. All you need to do is hit the red record button right here, and you're going to be recording video no matter what settings you're in around the dial. Manual is where I like to live. You have AV, that stands for aperture priority, where you set the aperture and the camera will set everything else. Then you have TV, it doesn't let you watch TV or anything. There's no Netflix on this camera, though that is a good idea for the future. TV is its timed value, which is your shutter speed. So it's shutter priority. Then you've got P, which is basically full auto, but you have more control over the menu system. And then that takes us back to A right here. So now moving up to the shutter button, that's this black thing right here in the middle. You press this halfway down to get your focus, and then you press it all the way down to take a photo. This ring that goes around here, ring around the posy, pocket full of, I don't know the song anymore. It's ring around the rosy. Shows you how much I don't have any kids or young kids in the family anywhere, so I don't hang out with kids, all right? I'm sorry I didn't know ring around the rosy, pocket full of posy. Ashes, ashes, we all fall down. I remember that part. And what happens after the, anyway, back to the camera. You turn this dial and this is what's gonna change your shutter speed. Where else could we move? We've got this button right here that says MFN. So this is another one of those function buttons that you're able to map inside the camera. Moving to the top, this is your hot shoe. This is where you would put a flash if you wanted to get an external flash. I also put my Rode microphone here for when I'm vlogging, because if you're buying this as a vlogging camera, you're gonna wanna put an extra microphone here that's gonna give you better audio than what's inside the camera. Now, right here is your electronic viewfinder. This is what it's called an EVF. You look through it and what you see is what you're gonna be taking pictures of. Now, I'm gonna turn the camera off now because I wanna show you the LCD screen. This screen right here is a full touch panel. You can touch it, you can control just about anything, touch where you wanna focus, touch to shoot, touch the menu systems, but it also does the best thing, which is this. It fully tilts and rotates all the way around. So if you're gonna go ahead and do the vlogging thing, you can go ahead and hold it like this, and you have a tilting, rotatable, they call it a vari-angle screen, and that goes right back here. You also have your play button, menu button, info button, you have a zoom in button and a zoom out button. It's right there in blue, so you can see that if you're gonna zoom in on a picture, not taking a picture. That's not what you don't hold that down to zoom the lens. You hold that down when you're reviewing an image. It will zoom in or zoom out and give you the checkerboard so that you can look at more images. Inside this dial, you've got your Q button, which is a good button to know, the quick button, so you can access almost everything from the outside of the camera by hitting the Q button. I'll show you all of that when we plug the camera in and you can see my menu system. You have AF manual, that's how you'll turn off autofocus or turn on autofocus to go from manual or the other. The trash can where Oscar the Grouch lives, if you press it, it takes you to Sesame Street where Sunny Days, yeah, Sunny Days, that's the song. Then you've got flash options, so you would hit that to control your flash. And then this one that I can barely see, hold on, that's your exposure compensation, plus minus. I couldn't even see what it said. So there's that. I want to show you back the top of the camera. This is where the flash is. You pop this up, there's your flash, you pop it down. So it's not going to automatically pop up when you need it like some other cameras, but that also is good if you're in a situation where you don't want to use the flash, you just don't pop it up. Now over here on the bottom is your tripod socket. That's where you would attach the plate if you're gonna put it on a tripod, or if you had a Joby GorillaPod, this is where you would screw that in so you could do your vlogging and hold it out just like this. Moving around to the side of the camera, you've got your mic input right here. It should be red, right? Let me see. Is it red? Is it red? No. In Sony cameras, it's red. In Canons, it's just black. But that's where your microphone goes. You'll also find that there is no headphone jack. Right here is where your NFC is. So if you're going to go ahead and connect that to a phone, you would just tap it there if your phone is NFC available. And then coming around to the other side, you've got your wireless settings. So if you want to turn on Wi-Fi, you're going to go ahead and click this button, and it's going to pull up some information on the back of the screen, so it's going to help you do that. Right behind door number 2, you have the USB cable as well as an HDMI port, and that basically runs us through the entire outside of the camera. And now let's move into the menu system. Let me jump in here real quick and ask you a question. Do you have my app called My Gear Vault? Well, if you don't, it's the best way to input, organize, and protect your gear, and it's absolutely free. So go check it out at mygearvault.com. It's available for iOS and Android. Now let's get back to the video. So let's go through the menu settings and how I would personally set it if this was my camera. Now before I go too far, you see this thing right here? This is an Atomos, which is recording the exact display that is on the back of the camera so that you can see everything that I'm doing. That also means that I do not have touch controls on the back of this LCD monitor at this point because it's being plugged into this thing, but this is good because you get to see it. So first things first, you see that it says push and hold the switch in whatever that diamond triangle thing is, direction, and then rotate the lens to enable shooting. If you have the kit lens that the camera came with, it has a button right here on the side. You push that button forward, you rotate the lens far enough, and then it clicks in and it's all ready to go. It's also going to tell you to close it when you turn off the camera. So you just hold it in and turn it as far as it goes the one way, and it collapses down and makes it smaller. So I do that every time I turn the camera on and every time I turn the camera off. But you need to do that in order to take the photos. So now that that's out of the way, let's go through the menu. So the first thing I notice is I absolutely despise this bright menu. Look at this. Look how bright and vibrant and saturated it is. This is by default. If you'd like to turn this off, which I highly recommend, you go all the way over to display level. I hit OK, I hit menu display, and I go to standard. This is what all of the Canon cameras are going to look like when you look at it in the standard mode. It's gray, it's easier to look at, it's more forgiving on your eyes. If you're in a dark situation, it's gonna look really terrible if you turn on the back of the camera and it's super duper bright. So let's go back to the very first menu options that it gives you. This right now are the menu options that it gives me when I'm in full auto, which is the green mode. I'm actually gonna get out of that mode and show you what it would look like when you get into the manual modes. So if you're in P, TV, AV, or M, you're gonna have full control and unlock all of the menu options and the menu systems so that you can take more control. If that's not something you wanna do, then just go through the menu this way. But I'm gonna switch over into manual. Now I'm in manual. I don't need to look at this display, but it's there. Anyway, so we're gonna hit menu. The first thing we see is image quality, and it's set to large JPEG. I personally like to shoot RAW. That's what my shirt says, so that's what I do. So what I would do here, because I can't touch the back of the screen, just remember you can simply touch the screen and it's going to activate that setting or give you access to it. In this case, there's turn dials, so it's showing me turn this thing to get to RAW, and I'm gonna go to RAW right here, hit the center OK button, and now I'm set to RAW right now, RAW plus JPEG large. I recommend that you shoot in both if you want those JPEGs. I personally don't shoot JPEGs at all, but again, it comes down to personal preference. Still image aspect ratio, I leave that at 3:2, but you can see right here that a guide is built into the camera to give you some help. Choose the image aspect ratio of width to height. I mean, that was pretty basic, we understand that, but it's really nice that they can give you a quick definition right in the camera. Image review is something I personally turn off. What that means is when you take a picture, it's gonna show up on the back of the camera or in your electronic viewfinder if your eye is against it, and it's distracting when I'm trying to shoot photos. So I take my photos, and if I want to review them, I go ahead and hit the play button on the back of the camera, and that's going to allow me to review the images. I don't touch lens aberration correction, flash control I leave off, drive mode. This is something that you can access from the outside of the camera, but I'll show you right here. Single shooting, meaning you'll take one frame every time you press the button. This one is high speed continuous. As long as you hold your finger down, it's going to keep shooting continually. This is low speed continuous. It's going to shoot continually, but at a slower speed. Then you've got your self timer, 10 seconds, 2 seconds, and then you could do the self timer continuous, which means after it takes one picture, you can have it set to do how many? 9? 10? Look at that, 10. Meaning, say you're in a group, you're setting up a group picture. You want it to go every 2 seconds to take a picture. You press the button, after 2 seconds, it takes one picture. If you set it to 10, it's gonna wait, take another picture, then take another picture until it's done those 10 images, which is pretty cool for group shots. So I'm gonna go back here and I'll leave it in continuous high speed. Moving on to menu number 2, we'll start at the top with exposure compensation. It's not something I ever personally use. And keep in mind, going through each one of these settings, I'm just trying to save you time from having to read the manual, and I think I give a better explanation on how I would personally set it for my own use, which is what I suggest you guys do. But also, you can figure out how to do most of this after the fact with the help of this video. ISO speed settings, you can set this outside of the camera, but it could be auto, or it could set to ISO auto with the max of being 6400. It won't go past that. I personally change the ISO when I'm doing stills. If I'm vlogging, I'm doing auto ISO because it's just much easier to do. Now going back, we've got ISO speed settings also. Oh, this is for video, so you can see that it's going to go to a max of 12,800. Can it go past that? Wow, it can go past that to a high of 25,600. You're gonna end up seeing more noise and grain. If you're in a super low light situation, it's not gonna look good anyway. So moving back, auto lighting optimization is off. This is not something that I want on at all, and it's also not going to affect your RAW files if you're shooting RAW. Highlight tone priority, I turn that off as well. Moving on to number 3, we've got metering mode. I generally leave it on evaluative metering. What that is doing is taking the brightest part of the scene, the darkest part of the scene, and giving an average and setting your camera right there. I generally leave it there at all times. I really don't go into partial metering, spot metering rarely anymore, and center weight average. I just leave it in evaluative. Metering timer, 8 seconds. Choose the exposure value, shutter speed, and aperture display period. That's how long it stays on when you're looking through the camera. This is where it's defaulted. I actually didn't have a problem shooting with that, so I leave it there. Expo simulation. Screen brightness simulating the brightness of the final image. Well, that's kind of what I want it to be. I want to see what my final image is going to look like. What other options? Disable and enable. No, I want to see what my final image is going to look like. I want a good representation of what I'm shooting. Moving up to number 4, we've got white balance. I leave that on auto white balance for stills because I shoot RAW and I can change that later. For the most part, the camera does a great job with auto white balance these days. Custom white balance you could set, say you're under a 5600 degree light bulb and you're doing video, you could lock in the white balance at that white balance. Wow, they even give you white balance shift bracketing, correct the white balance color tone, or record with auto adjust. They don't really explain this stuff very well. I'm not even going to explain this one either because I don't personally use it. Color space, sRGB is where I do it. Picture style, you can go ahead and set all of these different picture styles from auto to standard to portrait to landscapes to fine details, neutral, faithful, monochrome, and then you could even set up to 3 of them yourself. Now, I'm going to give you a little word of warning. If you go ahead and shoot in monochrome and you're shooting JPEG, then your images are going to show up black and white with no color detail. Same thing if you shoot video, it's going to be black and white. Now, if you shoot RAW and you're shooting in monochrome, the preview on the back of the screen is going to be in monochrome, but when you bring it back into the computer to edit the RAW file, you'll still have that color data. You'll just go click on color instead of black and white, and it will show back up. So back into the menu system, we're going to move on to number 5, long exposure noise reduction. I'm actually surprised they have this off right off the rip, but I leave it off. High ISO speed noise reduction. I personally turn this off as well. I don't want any noise reduction added to my files. If you're shooting JPEGs, that's what it's affecting. If you're shooting RAW, it's not going to affect it either. But I personally turn that off. Dust delete data, I don't even use this. Obtain data from removing dust, use alongside software. Yeah, I've never bothered with this in any of my cameras. Touch shutter, this is enabled. This means you can touch the screen and it will take pictures. I'm actually going to turn that one off. I don't like that function because sometimes I like to see where the focus is, and if you're moving the focus and you touch the screen, it's going to focus and then shoot a picture, and I turn that off. Touch and drag AF settings. Who knew they put this technology in here? This is a really good technology that's not in my $6,000 Nikon. So touch and drag AF is really cool to use. You would turn it on, enable it. Position method, absolute. I don't even know what the hell that means. Absolute or relative. It's not my relative. It's not a family member. I don't even know what that means, so let's leave it on absolute. Active touch area, I know what this means. You can set it so that on the back of the screen, you can move your focusing points with control. I like to do the bottom right, so if my finger is on the bottom right of the screen, I can move like this with my face up to the camera, just like this. And it's going to move the focusing points much faster than I could move them myself. So I go ahead and set it right there. But play around with that setting to see which one works best for you. AF operation, one shot AF. So the difference is one shot means single shot. If you press your finger halfway down on the button, you're probably going to hear a beep. And that means as long as your finger is pressed halfway on the button, the focus isn't shifting at all. So you could shift. But remember, if you move or your subject moves, you're going to want to refocus. When you go to servo, that is continuous autofocus. As long as your finger's pressed halfway down on the button, it's going to continuously focus and track your subject. So if you're shooting sports, you're in continuous focus servo. If you're shooting inanimate objects that aren't moving or doing portraits, you could go ahead and use the one shot for that one. AF method, we've got lock on. So focus tracking with locking is what I personally like to use. You've got zone AF and you've got 1-point AF. The focus on with the locking and tracking is a really good one to use. Canon's autofocus is really good. Moving on, we have AF frame size and eye detect AF, which I actually can't use right now because I'm plugged into this external recorder, but that eye AF is something that I would enable so that when you're photographing somebody, you can have it find the eye and track the eye so that you can make sure that that's in focus. Moving on, we've got continuous AF, which is kind of odd. Camera continually focuses until you press the shutter button halfway. That is super weird. I don't want that feature, meaning if I'm just holding the camera like this, it's going to continually focus until I press the shutter halfway. Don't like that option. You are disabled. All right, focus mode. Let's go in this. Choose manual or autofocus. This is where you could change from auto to manual. It's also a button on the back of the camera that I showed you earlier. Moving on to number 7, we've got lens electronic manual focus. Let's see what that says. Disable after one shot, enable after one shot. I leave this exactly where it is because I don't use manual focus when I'm shooting with this camera for the most part. AF assist beam firing, that's on the front of the camera somewhere. I actually didn't show you earlier because it blended in, but I'm pretty sure that this lights up orange to light up your subject. It helps you focus in lower light situations. I don't like this. I turn it off because I don't want it to be a distraction, so I go to disable. Manual peaking settings in MF mode, emphasize edges of, this is good if you're gonna use manual focus. It's gonna be nice to see peaking right there. IS settings is definitely important. This is where you turn on image stabilization if you have lenses that have IS. You could have digital IS enabled for video. That's gonna help compensate for any shaking that you're doing. IS mode is enabled because there's no switches on the side of the camera to turn it on or off. So I generally just leave it on in the camera because I want that extra stability from the IS. Auto level, currently disabled, automatically keeps movie level while recording. That is crazy. That's gonna totally crop your image all the way, and I'm definitely leaving that disabled. Moving on to number 8, movie record quality. For you guys who are shooting video, you can go ahead and select all of these different options. I'm generally gonna be in 1080 at 24 frames a second. That's more cinematic, like what you're seeing in a movie. 1080 in 60 frames, that is going to be more like when you're watching TV. It's like real time. It's what your eyes are seeing. It's moving fast. Cinematic is where I like to be. You also have the option of doing lower quality, but I'm not doing that. And to point out, you get 29 minutes and 59 seconds of record time every time you hit the record button. That is just one of those things that is what it is in cameras. They've always been the max of 29.59. We believe it's for tax reasons from Europe or something like that. But look, 30 minutes of continuous record time is a lot of record time. So if you need to keep going, just stop it and then start it again. Back into the menu, we've got sound recording. I'm gonna leave on auto. Movie servo AF, I'm leaving that on enable because I like to have the continuous focus. The dual pixel AF in this camera is great for vloggers. Button functionality, you could go ahead and set this. You could half press to meter, and I'm assuming, oh wow, it doesn't let you use it as a record button, but I leave it exactly where it's at. Back through the menu, auto slow shutter. So let me click on this. I have this enabled, automatically record brighter movies when dark. Basically, if you're not going to set your camera to manual or custom settings when you're shooting your videos, it's going to compensate for you. So I would leave this on. Now, some of you may be wondering, where's the 4K option? Because this camera offers you 4K. Well, the only way you can get into that is you turn this top dial to the camera mode or the movie mode right here. You go ahead and you hit menu, and then you have to find it. So let's see where it is. Right here under movie record quality, you have movie record size. You hit OK. and there is your 4K option. So it gives you 29:59 in terms of record time at 24 frames a second. Now keep in mind it's going to crop down your image sensor just a little bit, and it's also no longer going to use dual pixel AF, so your autofocus won't be as good, but it has this option right here for you if you'd like to go ahead and use it. Also, they have high frame rate, which is currently disabled. If you'd like to shoot something at 120 frames a second, which is it's in HD, but it's a lower quality, it's not 1080, it's 720, you would go ahead and hit enabled, and now everything that you shoot, you're gonna get slow motion 120. It's pretty good, it's pretty cool, and I have to remind you that in order to focus that, it's not going to autofocus on its own. You gotta press the button halfway down to lock the focus where it's gonna lock, and then do the slow motion. So for now, I'm gonna go ahead and turn that back off to disabled, and get back into the menu system, and rotate back here to manual, and we're gonna start back in the playback menu. So here we go, right here, I don't touch any of this. So I keep moving. Raw image processing, I don't do that in the camera either. I really don't touch any of this stuff because I don't want to make any changes to my images in the camera. You could do ratings if you wanted to rate your images from 1 to 5 so that they show up in your computer like that. Slideshow, I don't do that. Set image search, none of this stuff. I don't touch it, so that's why I'm skipping by it as well. Same thing. Now this is the wrench menu. I call it the wrench menu. It's a pretty important menu. Now remember, if you're in manual settings on the top of the camera, you are unlocking all of the functions that the camera lets you get access to. If you're in the auto modes, I don't believe you have section number 5 here, which is an important section. Select folder, I leave that the way it is. File numbering, I like to do continuous because the other option is manual reset. Actually, look at that. It only gives you, oh, there it is, auto reset or continuous. I like it to be continuous, meaning after one photo shoot and I take the card out and I took 10 pictures, it's gonna start off numbering it at 11 instead of starting it back at 0 or 1, meaning you could have overlapping images. Next up is auto rotate. Now it's on, it says specify display orientation for vertical shots when played back. Now, right now it's on for both the computer and on the camera. It's great when it's on the computer because I want it to show up oriented properly on the computer, but I don't like what happens when you have it on the camera because look, it doesn't utilize the entire screen, so it makes it much smaller when you're shooting verticals. That's why I like to personally have it just on for the computer because now look, it shows your entire screen filled with that one photo. So moving down to format, this is what you're going to do when you put a new card in the camera, where anytime you're done with a photo shoot and you've already backed everything up, you're going to go ahead and hit format. I'm not going to format it because I have my entire Paris trip on here, which is already backed up in multiple places, but you would go ahead and go over to OK and hit format, and that's going to erase all of your data. Just know that once you hit this button and you hit OK, it's pretty difficult to get your files back once you shoot over them, or pretty much once you do that. So I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel. Wireless communication settings. This is where you would set up your Wi-Fi for getting to the app with the Canon Control app. Really cool app. Definitely play around with that. But GPS settings, I'm pretty sure there is no GPS in this camera. To use this function, start the Canon app. So what this means is you're going to have to connect to the app on your phone. It's going to talk to your camera, sending the GPS location back, and also it's going to use more of your battery power. So if you want to get GPS location, take one picture with it on, and then in the computer software later, just sync the metadata with the same location if that's where you were located, and then they will all have that GPS data. So back to my menu, and let's move to number 2. Eco mode, I currently have off. Turn off the display to save power. You can set all those settings for yourself. I did not turn that off. Power saving, set power saving functions. Display off, we've set it to 30 minutes so it doesn't go off, but you should set these auto offs to save battery power. Date and time settings, of course, it's as simple. You set your date, you set your time. Language, if you don't speak English, you're probably not understanding what I'm saying right now, or you're reading the subtitles, which makes me sound weird when you're reading them, but this is where you would change the language for the camera. Video system, NTSC is where it's set for the cameras in the United States. You could change it to PAL if you're not in the United States. Touch control, standard, disable touch operation, or set the screen sensitivity. I leave it on standard. I know I'm extra sensitive sometimes, but I like to leave it on standard myself. Beep, I like to hear that beep, but if you're in a situation where you don't want to hear that beep, like when you're touching the screen and it says boop, boop, or you're using the menu system, every time you touch it, it goes boop, boop. If you don't want to make noise and you need to be in a quiet place, which is kind of like when they threw me in the corner when I was in school in my quiet place, you would just go ahead and hit disabled. Sensor cleaning is what you would do in order to clean that sensor. Let the camera clean the sensor. It's going to shake off any dust or particles. It will do a pretty good job. It's a good actually, every time you turn off the camera, I'm pretty sure it does it automatically. HDMI resolution auto, HDMI HDR output off as well. Shooting info display. This is what you're going to see. Screen info settings. Self-explanatory, just look at the screen right now. You could turn these off. It's just showing you the different options you have. Once you hit this button right here, that's the info button, it's gonna cycle through these different screen settings when you're trying to see which one you wanna use. So turn the ones off you don't want and leave the ones on that you do want. VF toggle settings, basically the same exact thing except for it's what you're seeing inside the viewfinder. That's pretty distracting in the viewfinder. I'm not using that, but same thing, hit the info button and you can cycle through those in the camera. Grid display, you could either turn that on or you could turn that off. Look at the different options. You could play tic-tac-toe, you could play diagonal. Who's winning there? Look at that. That guy is so good that he wins across the board twice. So good. I leave this off, but if you want to see your rule of thirds, you could do the 3x3 grid. It's pretty cool that they give you that option. Histogram display, brightness, let's see, brightness or RGB. If I'm going to use the histogram at all, which is a representation of your exposure, I'm doing brightness. I'm not doing RGB. Display size, large or small, is just going to be the difference in the size of the histogram display. And reset, we're not going to go ahead and reset that right now. Reverse display on, reverse image display like a mirror. That's for when you're doing your vloggy style. I leave it on because it works. Display performance. Choose energy efficient or smooth shooting screen display. Oh wow, I didn't even know this was here when I shot it for a week. So I'm leaving it exactly where it's set because it worked well for me and I didn't have a problem with that at all. Viewfinder display format. Choose the display format shooting screen in the viewfinder. Display 1, display 2. It just looks like it shrinks the image down. And that's it. So I'm leaving it on display 1. Display settings, display control, auto. I don't even know what that is either. Auto or manual. It's not giving me any information, so it's staying auto right there. Now this is the last function from the wrench that you get, number 5, if you're in manual, like I said earlier. Custom functions. You can set a bunch of the different buttons on the camera to do a bunch of different things. You're gonna have to play with this one to map it out to see if you want maybe the shutter to do something different than what it comes default as. You can change the MFN, the manual function button, which is this one down here. Hold on, let me click in here. This one's set to ISO, but you could change it to any of these other options, which is actually pretty cool that they give you all of these options to do. So that's all to taste, so play around with that yourself. Clear settings, I'm not clearing them. Copyright information, you could go ahead and enter your author's name like photo by or photo Jared Polin, Frono's photo. I like to have that so it's always in there. Same thing with copyright data. Enter it once and then it's going to save into your metadata. Manual software, oh Jesus. It gives you the manuals and softwares and the URLs. Shoot this QR code to get the manual or just watch my video. How about that? Certification logos, that's just there because they need to put it there, and that's your firmware. Moving on to the next section, which is display levels. We've got, see, this is where I changed from guide view, which I don't like at all. It's very toy-ish, to standard. I like standard. It's darker, it's easier on the eyes, so I leave it there. Mode guide, I turn this off personally. Feature guide, I also turn that off. This is where the camera pops up different recommendations for how you should shoot. I don't need any of that because I'm super awesome and super good, but it actually comes in handy on occasion. Look, if you're just starting out, leave that mode on, see if it bothers you, and then you can turn it off right here in the menu system. And then last, we have the My Menu section. This is where you put any item that you want to quickly get to quickly. And I know I just said quickly twice quickly, but you would put things like, if you wanted to get to white balance fast, you could put it in there. You want to get to your movie settings, you would put it there. This is a nice function to have. And that's it, guys. That is a rundown of the menu system, and next I want to show you something else. Have you signed up for the Phronos Photo email list? Well, if you haven't, just look for this orange box over on the website, put your name, email address in it, hit send it, and I will send you a free guide to capturing motion in low light situations. Now back to the video. So now I want to walk you through what you're going to see on the display of the back of the camera. So right here, starting at the top left, you see M. It's letting you know that I'm in manual mode. Now, how do you change the settings quickly while you're either looking at the back of the screen or having your eye up to the EVF? You hit this Q button right here in the middle that says set on the back of the camera. You go ahead and hit that, and then you can quickly change a ton of settings, like choose the autofocus method. Will you want to be an auto continuous, which is servo, or one shot? Then you've got how many frames a second you want to shoot as you move down, metering mode on the left-hand side. You've got image quality you could change. Look, a lot of these things you may not change often, but at least they're there. White balance, and then it tells you this is the picture style. Auto lighting optimizer is disabled. These creative filters are disabled, and the mode that I'm shooting. So to get out of this, to make it not active anymore, I hit the Q button once again. Now down at the bottom, you see that orange turn dial right there near the 1/80th of a second? That's your shutter speed. Now, when it has that orange dial there, that means if you turn the dial, which is this front dial right here, you're gonna see that my exposure is changing. All right, and I couldn't figure out how do I change my aperture without just literally touching the back of the screen and changing aperture. Well, in manual mode, if I go ahead and hit up on the up, down, left, right, BA select start button, that's your up, down button right here, the D-pad, it just moved that scrolly wheel to go in front of the f-stop. So you can see as I turn it higher, it's getting darker because I'm cutting back on the amount of light being let in. And as I go back down to 4.0, it's letting more light back in. So I'm going to go ahead and hit up again, and it's going to move it over to exposure compensation, which I'm not changing or not touching, and then back to reality, which is 1/100th of a second. Now, the info button, when we hit it, you can see what happens. The histogram shows up on the top, and it's pretty distracting on the screen if you're trying to take pictures to have all of this stuff there. This gets rid of everything, though I don't want to get rid of everything all the time because I want to see my exposure. This is what it would look like on the back of the screen. That's a good setting. You can see everything. I hit it once again, and I have just my exposure settings on the back, so when I'm looking through the EVF, I can see just what I need to see. So any way you do this, you'll get used to it. So that's a rundown of the back of the camera right there. Oh, also, right next to manual, you see where it says 1302? That means there are 1302 images left that I can shoot, and there's 29 minutes and 59 seconds in record time if I was to hit the record button, and also the battery says full. So look, I'm gonna hold the button halfway down. You can see that it's continually focusing. I'm gonna hold the button in, boom, boom, boom. You can see that it's saving the images. That's why it's blinking. When it's blinking, it means it's saving, and that's it. Next up, I want to show you what happens when you review the images. So to get into the playback mode, all you do is hit the play button on the back of the camera, and you're faced with my leg. You probably won't see my leg on there, but let's hit info and see what happens. As we hit info, we can toggle through and see the settings that were on when I was taking the photos. 1/125th at 5.6 at ISO 6400. It's showing me the JPEG large down there on the bottom right-hand corner. All the way at the top left, you can see that it's 346 images of 368. The battery power, and then all the way on the right-hand side, you see, I guess the 100 is the folder that it's in, and the 964 is, I believe, how many pictures I've taken so far total as it keeps adding up. So I hit info again, you can see the histogram, you can see all of the other settings, and I'll keep hitting through. There's your the lens that I used. This is all good metadata to take a look at, and then back to the beginning right here. Now, to get through the images, you could use the touch screen and just swipe across. You could zoom in or zoom out. let's see, we could go ahead and zoom out with the zoom out button, and you can see that the checkerboard is there, so you could quickly get through images if you want to find something. And then I hit the star again, and that's going to zoom back in. Now, if you want to delete an image for whatever reason in the camera, you use the Oscar the Grouch button. It's green. It's not. It's actually a blue trash can. Now, this is a function that surprised me because I personally do not delete any images off the camera when I'm taking pictures. I leave everything that's there and I deal with that after the fact in the computer. But if for some reason you need to remove some files, this is pretty smart. It gives you the option to erase just the RAW, erase the JPEG, or erase both. In this case, I don't do any of that, so I don't delete anything at all. That's it, guys. That is a run through of this entire camera. I hope it helped you out. I hope it helps you set everything the way that you need to set it. If you found that this video was valuable, please leave a comment down below. Also hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe, as well as click on the bell button next to the subscribe so that you will be notified when new videos go live. That's it. Thank you very much for watching. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com. See ya. To check out a playlist of the best videos with Honor, go ahead and click on the screen right now. You can also click where it says subscribe if you haven't done so already, and then there's about 10 more seconds for you to make a decision on what to click. The clock is ticking. Go ahead and click something.